Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. I'm Stu Ellis. I take care of the farm chores here at Channel 3. Our wet weather has delayed harvest, but many counties have fought wet weather all year, and you'll hear about help being on the way. Wet soils in the springtime can be a problem. You'll meet one farmer experimenting with a strategy. You'll meet a farmer networking all around his farm, some very important locations being connected. You'll learn about how the soybean market forecasts the COVID pandemic. All that and more on this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. Have a notepad ready.
Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week with host Stu Ellis.
Well, weather adversities earlier this year certainly prompted a disaster declaration for Illinois agriculture, making low-interest loans available to farmers in most central Illinois counties. John Gerke with the Illinois Office of the Farm Service Agency says funds can be used to replenish your working capital.
You know, we had some weather issues earlier in the year, and through the governor's office they requested a disaster declaration. So we have 12 primary counties that were declared a disaster. And in addition to that, I believe 22 contiguous counties. Now, along with that designation comes a loan program for low interest, what we call disaster loans. And those are intended to help producers who have suffered a loss due to weather-related issues. And the loss would have to be 30% or more. And it also takes into account, crop insurance. So, depending on what their production is and what the crop insurance is, they still would have to have a significant loss after that. So that comes into play. We do make loans only to farm operators, not to, investors and such. So you have to be the person that's actually on the farm as the operator. But there's a lot of flexibility with the loan funds, and they're below market. Right now it's 2.875, and the loan terms are flexible, and they can be used for a great number of things. It's going to come from, replenish working capital or, repay operating money that weren't able to pay because of the disaster. And we can turn that money out if there's collateral available. It is subject to other credit availability. So the USDA does not compete with private lenders. So if we don't make loans to people that don't need it just because the interest is lower. So we get referrals mostly from conventional lenders so that we're not competing with them. So that is a caveat of our entire loan program.
And for information, see your local Farm Service Agency office. Illinois corn growers started the Precision Conservation Management Program about 6 years ago to help farmers calculate the economic benefits of reduced tillage. Recently, the Illinois Soybean Association joined in to help expand the program to nearly 36 central Illinois counties and allowing a new twist to that program.
Christian County farmer Darrell Hall was in a quandary. He was interested in the benefit of cover crops, but was uncertain if they would be successful on his particular farm.
I just have concerns about our real heavy, flat, black ground getting dried out good enough in the spring of the year to be able to plant in a real timely, correct method. Yeah, I just think we'll have so much residue. We have a lot of residue out there from our soybeans and our corn because in this part of the country they yield so well. And then when you add the cover crop residue, maybe there's that issue that there's just too much residue out there to let it dry out.
So one of the things that you're going to be looking at is maybe if you want to continue with cover crops is what sort of a cover crop species then that you would be planting.
That's correct. We may be experimenting with different species to see which one will do the job that we want a cover crop to do and then be able to be dried out so that it'll plant in a real timely manner.
To get help, he turned to the Precision Conservation Management Program and Illinois Soybean Association Director of Agronomy, Abigail Peterson.
What he'll be doing is comparing two different systems before his soybean crop next year. So he's comparing a no-till or a cover crop field versus a non-cover crop field. And then also on top of that are 2 different tillage practices. So in this case, he did broadcasting the cereal rye with his dry fertilizer, came in and did a vertical till pass to kind of help incorporate that in, get some good seed to soil contact. And then over here you can see he chisel plowed the field. So overall, we'll be comparing how these 2 stack up against each other financially and then agronomically throughout the year. Usually a good practice before soybeans is doing a cereal rye practice. So you can actually go pretty late with cereal rye with planting. It's pretty hardy, winter hardy, but he actually got this planted pretty timely. It was with September 13th is when he got this broadcasted. So it's had time to grow and establish, which is really great to see. So I'll be out here doing stand counts and looking at also the planting date versus how much biomass we can accumulate, which really helps boost that soil health aspect that we're trying to achieve.
It's wet out there. It is. When we recorded that, it was muddy. We walked all the way across that tilled field, and
you know, on Sunday, last Sunday, we had many spots 2, 3, 4 inches of rain, but there were some spots that saw even higher amounts than that, and it was just so widespread. It's a little bit different forecast this week now. It's gonna be drier, which is good, but for those who still got to get in there, it's still a little swampy out there.
Get to the good news here.
Yeah, so the good news is that things are going to be drying out, which will be nice. The temperatures are going to be a little bit cooler, though. But in terms of the precipitation for a lot of the portions of the Midwest here, we are looking at things to be a bit more in the way of around 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of rain. The thing that's going to be noteworthy, though, will be the cooler temperatures arriving here by the start of next work week. After being well above average here for a lot of October, November is definitely going to be starting things off here below average, including some 40s for highs as we go into the middle of next week. And what we are going to be really paying attention to will be some of those cold overnight temperatures. Tuesday morning probably have temperatures in the middle 30s, but Wednesday and Thursday morning, those will likely be in the low 30s for our lows, which means that we're most likely going to get, in many spots, our first frost in the area. Our chance for warmer temperatures here are actually going to be pretty close to normal. We're thinking going into about the 2nd week of November. So if you still got to get out there, it's not going to be exactly as warm above average, but all things considered, it is going to be a drier forecast, though, during that same time, November 6th to the 12th. So, Stu, one thing that we're going to be watching out for will be, again, like we've been talking about, some of those cooler temperatures. A lot of us are going to see most likely our first frost later on in our forecast this week.
Well, we've certainly seen in the last few weeks a lot of green on fields that should not be green at this time of year.
Yes.
Tremendous amount of harvest lost, and the more that when we head back into the fields, it's going to be even getting worse.
Yep. So again, after a great start to the season, things really have taken a turn here at the end, and hopefully everyone can get it out, but some may have to leave some of it in there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Coming up, trip to the pumpkin patch.
Welcome back to Midwest Ag This Week.
Well, Morton is the state and national center of gravity when it comes to pumpkin production. John Ackerman has produced canning pumpkins under contract. This year has his operation changed for the public to find that perfect carving pumpkin.
Pumpkin season, and in fact, the day that we're recording this is National Pumpkin Day. Did you know that?
I didn't even realize that.
Well,
I'm kind of ashamed.
Don't worry about that. This is John Ackerman and livestock. John is a pumpkin producer in the Morton area, and how long have you been producing pumpkins?
So I think I had my first contract with Libby's for the canning pumpkins back in 1983.
So you've had quite a few years then.
I've got a little experience with it. Yeah.
This year you didn't have a contract, but what makes the difference between having one and not having one?
Well, first of all, they have to offer it to you. They have a list of farmers that they generally go to, and then they kind of rotate the crops so you're not continuously growing pumpkins in the same acreage, and then they'll offer you a contract. They will tell you what the price will be, and then you have to decide whether you accept it or not. Generally, when they set a price, they compare it to what they believe the price of corn or beans will be, and they try to make it kind of attractive for a person to accept the contract. That way, they don't have to worry about too many people turning them down. So generally, there's an advantage to raising those pumpkins because of the way they set the price.
Okay, and that price covers production costs?
Well, they'll set a price that's per ton, and they'll provide the seed. They'll do the harvesting, which is mechanical. We'll do the tillage, the management, the fertilizing. Sometimes we split costs if there's a need for insecticide or fungicide. So you put a pencil to it and decide, is it worth doing? Generally, when they offer, it's worth doing. What is remaining out in the field are mostly picked over. You have to have a perfect saleable pumpkin for the public to pick. So these are the ones that are near the end. There's very many good ones. I never sell 100% of them, although I dream of it. But what you see on the field looks like a lot, but really maybe that's 20% of what was grown, and that might be the 20% that might not have been very, very saleable.
We appreciate John Ackerman for visiting with us. Well, some field work is already underway to prepare for next year, and nitrogen will soon be going on. Illinois Nutrient Research and Education Council is reminding farmers to use the 4 R's: right, source, rate, time, placement. And you'll hear about that.
Julie, we're in a soybean field. Looks like this is a good place that farmers are going to be putting nitrogen on very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in Illinois, we have a lot of different crop rotations, but probably the most common one is a 50-50 corn-soybean. So we'll see a lot of fields that were in soybeans this year that will be going to corn for the 2022 crop.
That's right. This is Julie Hewitt. Julie is head of the Nutrient Research and Education Council, and that funds a lot of research, such as nitrogen.
Absolutely. You know, Lowell Gentry at the University of Illinois, Dr. Emerson Knopfzinger are really the two that we count on a lot for our nitrogen research. We also rely pretty heavily on the work that Dan Schaefer at Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association does. And really what a lot of that is to make sure that when we're this time of year, you know, we're wrapping up harvest, we're thinking about, we've already shifted gears in a lot of cases to the 2022 crop. And so it's helping to make sure that farmers have the best scientific-based information to go out and get ready for next year's crop.
Now, they're not, you're not saying totally don't put nitrogen on this fall, but count on really better performance if it's next spring.
Well, and not even just that, but just making sure if you're going to go in the fall that you're following all of the best management procedures that would be associated with that. So, or best management practices. So really what we're thinking about for, you know, fall applications is, again, let's use the right rate. Let's make sure that we're not putting our anhydrous on until soil temperatures are 50 degrees and the temperatures are trending downward. We want to reduce the amount of denitrification that happens in the fall. We of course want folks to be using an inhibitor to help keep that nitrogen where it is. And then the other thing is to consider using a cover crop. So a cover crop will help take up excess nutrients left over, particularly from a corn crop, but also from soybeans, and then grow. So that will be a crop that grows through the whole winter season.
All right, some interesting thoughts from the NREC, the Nutrient Research and Education Council, and we appreciate Julie Hewitt for joining us today.
Thank you, Stu.
Well, Matt, hardly have a chance to get done with harvest, much less put on nitrogen.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a very interesting fall. I mean, bottom line, early on, things went really good. Later on in the fall, they didn't go so good. And, you know, there's a lot of crop out in the field yet. And so I think one of the biggest factors when you're talking about anhydrous ammonia, for instance, in central Illinois is, can we get it on? A lot of folks, including myself, contracted anhydrous, you know, in that $700 to $800 a ton range. Spot price currently is $1,200 a ton. Why is that important? If you don't get it on this fall, whether you have it contracted or not, those contracts will be ripped up if you don't get it on by the end of the year. And that's understandable because your supplier's in the same type of situation you're in.
Right. Matt Bennett joins us for a look at the markets, and we've been coming back up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a really nice market. It's not necessarily a type of move that you would generally see. For instance, in the second half of October, D's corn market continues to rally, you know, double-digit gains 2 weeks in a row at a time whenever we are banging on the door of all-time record type yield for both corn and soybeans with big acreage. So the corn crop on total production, you know, could be biggest ever, but you're still looking at big gains. Not only that, but basis has been strong. So there's a lot of really good things going on right now.
Okay. Matt, we've not only good markets now for the 21 crop, we've got some pretty fair markets for the 22 crop that I think a lot of people really ought to take a hard look at.
Yeah, I think so. You know, whenever you look, for instance, at Nova 22 soybeans, we're banging on the door of 1250. Those are pretty tough to pass up, especially when we talk about this fertilizer situation for corn. If you don't get a good fall anhydrous run, while 550 corn looks fantastic to me, and I'd certainly want to take off some risk there, I'll tell you what, it's tough for me to think that you're going to get big acres next year, you know, especially if you can't get the anhydrous on this fall. The system is not going to be able to accommodate all of us if everyone puts on, you know, spring anhydrous in the entire Eastern Corn Belt. So I'm very concerned, you know, about how that might play out. And so as a producer or someone advising producers, I'm a little bit more friendly D22 corn than I am Nova 22 beans.
All right, Matt, thanks much. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We'll see you in a few weeks. Matt Bennett of agmarket.net. And we'll be back with a look at some networking in a moment. We welcome you back, and in our Shop Talk segment today, we want to show you how to connect your shop with your office, your home, even your grain dryer, with an information relay system that lets you be in multiple places at the same time.
Harvest is one of the toughest times on the farm when there's a tremendous amount of labor that's needed. But that's not only time around, because there's sometimes we just don't have enough people and enough hands to control things, do we?
Yes, or the right people sometimes.
Or the right people. This is Matt Hughes. Matt farms to the west of Hayworth, and one of those challenges that a lot of farmers have is the lack of hands to do things. But you've got that solved. How did you solve that problem?
Oh, we fight that all the time. It's hard to keep good qualified people around, and it's harder and harder to find enough bodies to do things. And then when you do find even the bodies, then finding the skill to do some of the things. So one thing we found was a way to kind of connect our whole farm through the internet with products that are out there. And one of those products we use is kind of a mesh system. It's called Air Mesh, and it links our whole farm and a lot of devices on our farm, and then it makes that accessible through our devices that we can carry with us, like our cell phones, our desktop computers, our laptops, and take that with us. And I can run my farm from just about anywhere in the country now, if I had to. It's a series of these types of receivers and transmitters. We still get our traditional internet here on the farm. We're wireless in this area, and we get it off at a local elevator. That comes into our local point here, and then comes into our office. And our office then has one of these transmitters that broadcasts it out to the rest of the farmstead. And then we have a receiver in our house, so we can actually stream movies and things in our house through that system that way. So one internet source we can share with our house. We have one in our shop, so I can have access to my office when I'm working in the shop. The most useful one to me, though, is we keep one in our dryer, and that hooks our grain dryer into the system. And also one at our scale system. So we log all of our weights and things, and I can download that to our office at night. But that dryer lets me have an access to that dryer, then I can be anywhere in the world basically, and I can make changes to that dryer. I can change its settings and monitor what's going on, and even shut it down if I have to. But so it adds some safety and security, if nothing else, but also more lets me continue to run that dryer at peak for efficiency when I have to be away from it for an extended length of time doing something else that's just as important. Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. Good idea from Matt Hughes. We appreciate his suggestion.
Did you know that soybeans were the canary in the mine shaft? We'll tell you why in a moment. About 20 months ago, February of last year, farmers wanting to sell soybeans found that elevator managers would not do that after trading hours in Chicago. No one knew what was going on, but College of Aces professor Michelle Robe has found out why. It was the canary in the COVID mine shaft.
Right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and a colleague of mine over here reached out to me and he said, Michelle, you know, I've been talking to farmers and I've been talking to elevators, and it appears as though whereas before elevators would have no problem taking on positions with farmers after market hours in Chicago on the futures exchange, right now it doesn't look like they want to do any trades after hours. And we thought this was strange. And we have tried to reach out to some of the traders, and they told us, well, we saw that it was difficult to make money the way we used to. The why is a very good question. Our expectation is that some commercial market participants, perhaps in foreign countries, saw the slowdown happening in the soybean trade, might have been less willing to take on positions over there, might have changed the way in which they were trading. And when you see that people change the way in which they are trading, you typically infer from that that they might have information you don't have. And if you're an intermediary and somebody has more information than you do, that's not good for you as an intermediary. So you pull back. And so what we suspect, but we cannot prove, is that indeed what happened is that some intermediaries in the commercial grain channels abroad might have seen the impact of the COVID pandemic happening abroad, might have changed their patterns of buying. This might have been reflected in the futures markets, and so we might have seen everything rippling over to the United States.
But why soybeans and not corn and wheat?
You've got the million-dollar question, and I will try to answer it in this fashion. So China is extremely important for soybeans, and it is important for all the grains, but for soybeans in particular. And so what we found is that indeed the soybean market reacted first. Why there would not have been a rippling effect to corn and to the wheat market, interestingly enough, we find that the corn market liquidity does pull back, but 2 weeks after soybeans. Soybeans, when we look back, we found, when we did the analysis, we found that it was on the night of the 12th to the 13th of February that the soybean liquidity dropped by about 90%. So it literally is very high, and then suddenly, poof.
Poof, it was gone. Fortunately, soybean liquidity has come back, and that's why we're able to trade beans now. Well, that concludes this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. We want to salute Olivia Scheich of Tolono, Lizzie Schaefer of Owanaco, and the Decatur FFA chapter for its victories and good rating at the FFA convention. I'm Stu Ellis.